actually developed the satellite and put it into space on a SpaceX rocket. You have individual companies putting thousands of satellites, trying to compete with who has the largest constellation. And we get closer to what's called the Kessler Effect. I was called before the US Congress, the Energy and Commerce Committee, that wanted to understand more about blockchain. What we see as the next version or the future of AI is this whole emotional element, quantum computing.
Yeah.
And that's coming faster than probably most people realize. I would say for the students, I mean, you're coming into industry at a very exciting moment.
Hello everyone, today I'm with Hasshi Sudler. He is the CEO of Internet Think Tank. He is a professor at Villanova University, and he's a cybersecurity program director here at Comcast. He studied electrical engineering at Villanova University and got his MBA from MIT. He went from being an engineer at Tokyo to influencing policy at Washington, D.C. His story is an inspiration for anyone that is looking to make an impact in this digital age. Hasshi, welcome.
Thank you very much, Arda.
Thank you for being in my video. Can you tell us more about who is Hasshi Sudler and your overall career journey?
Sure. So Hasshi Sudler is mostly a technical guy, and I've had a long journey from my years in electrical engineering as a university student at Villanova University. I studied undergrad in engineering, and I've evolved into both a quasi-business person as well as engineer over the years, and I did my MBA at MIT to really understand more of the details of running a business, developing business, entrepreneurship. But my overall journey, for the most part, the overall arc is in technology. So we look at how business develops technology, and look at how technology can impact people's lives, as well as how technology is evolving in general, and what particular areas of technology has the biggest impact on the future.
That's amazing. You simultaneously started as the CEO of Internet Think Tank. You're teaching at Villanova University, and you're also a program director at Comcast. How do you manage all these, and what kind of advices would you give to students that are also having multiple responsibilities at the same time and trying to manage everything?
Well, I think it is a challenge, but I think it's one of the things that really keeps me inspired, because you have a variety of activities happening at the same time. They're all related. So the work I do at Comcast and cybersecurity touches the research that I do at Internet Think Tank, so they reinforce each other. And that touches the work that I do as a teacher, as a professor at Villanova University. I teach in cybersecurity, I also teach in blockchain technology. So all of these technologies and themes are all reinforcing each other. Whatever I learn from one area, I apply to the next. So I think if you can find that type of synergy in multiple projects and tasks that you're doing, that's probably the most ideal situation you can have. Your learning grows exponentially because you're applying some information you learned from one environment, but then you learn more from a new environment, and that helps you to get more perspective about those subjects, helps you become a better expert, and also helps you contribute even more in those various fields. So for those who are doing that, I encourage it. Of course, time management's important, and one has to make sure that they're balancing their time.
You got a family as well.
Yeah, the family as well, right? So of course, I use dinner time as a time to talk about my research. So it's a good thing. My wife likes to. She's a technical person as well, so she likes to talk about technology. But I think if you have that type of support from your family, from the various environments you're in, it's very easy to work and talk in all of these fields, because it's constantly reinforcing what you're learning and how you can apply that knowledge.
Very impressive, very impressive. You and your team conducted groundbreaking research by sending one of the first blockchain satellites into space to test inter-satellite transactions. Can you walk us through this ambitious project and how you got the idea and how you executed the idea as well?
Yeah, so the start of the idea really came when I was teaching at Villanova University. I was teaching blockchain courses, and we did see some companies start putting some blockchain satellites into space, particularly Space Chain was the first company that put a set of satellites in space to do blockchain related activities. And we knew that there was some interest in blockchain really going up, rather than just having blockchain on the surface of the earth. What if you extend it up into space, and what are the benefits of that? And apparently there are some really interesting benefits where you can capture unique data on satellites. And satellites have some of the most unique data that we can get because they have such a high vantage point looking down on Earth. You can't get that type of view and analysis from any other place. So if you can get that data to transact between satellites, such that one satellite can leverage another satellite's data, then you can really enrich the type of information that you can beam down to Earth and use some very unique data sets to understand what's happening on Earth, whether you're looking at weather patterns, looking at agricultural, land development, perhaps military has an interest in where things are moving. So there's so many applications. So one of my students in my course course, took on the idea, took on the challenge to do a research paper on how blockchains could get into space. What would the satellite look like? What would it do? How would the satellites interact? And that research ended up turning into research that we got outside of the classroom, and ultimately in my own company, Internet Think Tank, where we actually developed a satellite and we put it into space on the SpaceX rocket, and we launched in November 2023, where we were able to, for the first time, really look at what a blockchain, at least a single node of a blockchain, would do if it were in space, how it would communicate to Earth, and all of the patterns that we would be curious about in terms of the block time and timestamps. We know that time is a little bit different in space because the speeds are different and you're moving away from the gravitational source of the Earth. So all of those were things we wanted to understand. How does blockchain really behave in a space environment? And if we really want to use blockchains in space in the future, if we're talking about putting people on the moon and having them connected through some type of e-commerce based on blockchain and actually having currency between celestial bodies, we really have to understand fundamentally how blockchains would work in this new, harsh, and unique environment called space.
A lot of science and math involved, obviously. For those who are not familiar with blockchain, what's the main advantage of using blockchain in the space compared to the traditional systems that we have in the space right now?
Right, the traditional systems we have in space typically operate individually. So satellites that are up there have historically just operated alone, isolated satellites. They get data, they send it down. It's only very recent that satellites started talking to each other and transacting or transferring data to each other. So this new era of transferring information to each other is essentially creating a network. And we see companies very interested in creating constellations of satellites, putting up hundreds, maybe thousands of satellites that can coordinate and talk to each other. If you introduce the idea of blockchain, now we're talking about not just transferring information, but transacting that information, such that if you have a satellite and I have a satellite, maybe different companies or different entities, we still may want access to each other's data because you may have unique data that I don't have. My satellite may be limited in the instruments that it can have. So I may be very interested in purchasing your data, and we want those satellites to be able to kind of negotiate and exchange, transact that information in real time with each other without having to send the information back down to Earth or rely on people to orchestrate that exchange. So the satellites could query each other and say, well, you have information that I could use. I will purchase that information, and that is really what describes a transaction. That's what blockchains are really good for. It's creating these immutable transactions. They're very reliable. We know the transaction happened between these two entities. We know what was transferred, and we even pay for that transaction. So if we actually use tokens as a form of payment, one satellite can actually purchase the data from the other satellite. So it's a way of moving the benefits of blockchain and how it manages transactions in a secure way to an environment of space where we know there's very valuable data. And if we can have satellites kind of cooperate a bit more, one, we don't have to put so many satellites up for individual companies. We can leverage satellites that are already up there. And that helps us solve another problem that we're seeing, just too many satellites are being deployed. And that's kind of bringing us to a very crowded space. And that we'd like to mitigate and slow down. We can do that if we have more of a shared economy where satellites are sharing the information. And there's a mechanism for them to do that through transactions.
It's economically good as well, rather than just sending independent satellites all the time.
Absolutely. We see a lot of companies talking about, we're going to put 10,000 satellites up, and another company, of course, wants to compete with that, and they want to put a large constellation of their own. There's a sustainability limit to that approach where, you have individual companies putting up thousands of satellites trying to compete with who has the largest constellation. And we get closer to what's called the Kessler Effect, or what's also called the Kessler Syndrome, is where you have so many satellites that the probability of collision begins to increase significantly. And if there is a collision between two satellites, those satellites will break into thousands, hundreds of thousands of pieces, and those individual pieces travel faster than a speeding bullet. So if any one of those pieces hits another satellite, that will shatter into hundreds of thousands of pieces, and so on and so on. So
domino effect.
This domino effect is very real, and it's very scary because once you get to that point, there's almost no coming back. Once the Kessler Effect triggers and you have this domino effect, space becomes useless because you can't really launch anything in that type of environment.
Yeah. Very cutting edge technology right there, and very exciting stuff. Coming back to your company, you created your company almost 25 years ago now. Started as a software development company and evolved into a research company over the years. And you lived that entrepreneurship journey to the full extent. And what advice would you give to students or early grad or new grads that are looking into creating their own companies, making their own startups? What advice would you share with those people?
I think when you're going through the entrepreneurship journey, it's a very individual journey. There's a lot of mistakes you're going to make, and that's okay. Of course, you don't want to make a mistake that completely bankrupts you, embarrasses you, and you'll never be able to, But I think it's important that you pursue entrepreneurship with enthusiasm and not be afraid of it. To be an entrepreneur, however, one should take some disciplined steps, right? Try to understand the details and logistics of business, right? Don't think you can just make that stuff up. There are a lot of rules, there are a lot of patterns and economic behaviors that you need to be aware of, marketing in terms of how people behave as customers, in terms of making sure you set the pricing right? So price is more of a behavior that consumers have in terms of their willingness to pay. So those things, there's a lot of science behind those. And the better you understand the science behind the consumer's behavior, preferences, their experience, the better you can deliver a product that they want. I do see a lot of engineering folks who want to become entrepreneurs, but they're so engrossed in the technology that they forget about the business. And they think that a really nice application or nice technology is going to sell itself. It doesn't. You need to think about what the consumer's experience will be, whether they need it. Do they have a ready-made substitute? Can they use something else to do the exact same thing? So you do have to understand first the industry you're trying to go in, understand that very well, who the players are. There are a lot of other companies that may already exist doing the very same thing, and try to find what that niche is. And you often hear that in entrepreneurial talk, how you get your niche. And that really comes from having awareness of what's already happening in the market, where the market's going, what consumer trends are changing, and then really understanding your market segment. Like what piece of the market do you think you can create a solution for? But at the end of the day, an entrepreneur is a problem solver, someone who is creating a solution to a problem. And what you're saying is you're raising your hand in society and saying, hey, I've identified a problem that society has, and I'm electing myself to fix that problem. And I'm going to get a bunch of other people with like-minded, talent and skills to come together and fix this problem on behalf of society. So I think that's the right attitude to have. Because once you get into trying to solve the problem, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be a quick win or get rich quick, you come with a product that it's necessarily, and even if you do come up with a successful product, then that's when the real work begins because you now have to stay in business. Competition will not let you just, enjoy
take that thing, yeah.
Yeah, the competition will come in and they will say, well, we can do it better. And that's what should happen. So you should have this type of, evolution of products and technology based on competitive forces. So once you get into this, you have to be really committed. And I think that's the biggest attitude that a entrepreneur should have is this high level of commitment. If you don't have that attitude, you're going to drop out very quickly because the work is tough in order to get a successful product and let alone to stay in that market, to keep a successful
Would
product.
you agree with the statement that says love your problem, not your solution?
Absolutely. Yeah, you really have to love the problem because the problem is going to evolve. Your solution is going to change with it. If you think of the solution as just this one-off and it's going to stay, of course not. It's going to change maybe every year. Consumers will get used to a solution and then they want more. This insatiable desire from the consumer base. So no matter how good you think you can create a solution, there's always going to be more demand. And there's always going to be competition, things they can do it better and probably can. And that's the whole point, is to constantly innovate. Love the problem, keep driving to that problem. And create a team of folks who are really great problem solvers and they can execute well. One of the things I've learned in my entrepreneurial journey is that it's very easy to come up with an idea. It's easy to whiteboard things. It's really hard to execute and build it. And I think when companies are rewarded off of an entrepreneurial journey, it's because they're rewarded off of the execution of what they've done, right? They've come up with an idea, but the way they executed it was right. And they paid attention to what the consumers wanted. They made sure all those features were there. They tested it. They made sure performance was everything that the consumer wanted. They made sure those things were there. That's an execution, requirement. And if you do poorly on execution, no matter how good your idea is, the consumer base will simply look at it and say, we can't trust it. It's not reliable for us. They hope someone else would actually do it better. And oftentimes that's where competitors come in and say, yeah, we'll take their idea and we'll just do it better. And I think so you have to really focus a lot on execution.
A lot of copycats in the industry where they see an idea, they also, like a lot of competition in the industry, but the main points are understanding the industry, understanding the customer base, understanding your problem, as well as making sure that you execute it properly. You love the problem, not your solution. And it must be very tough to be in that cycle for more than 2 decades now.
Yeah, absolutely. The company has evolved. It really started during the birth of the internet. It was really, if you look back in year 2000, that was when the internet really was embraced by businesses. And everyone was looking at creating intranets and, can you create some internal intranet for companies to run applications? It became basically an application platform. And I was at the very beginning of that. And I made a decision, looking at the growth of the internet, to say, do I want to, continue working where I was at Morgan Stanley? And that was, a very nice company to work in, and we were doing some very interesting things. And really taking what we're doing at Morgan Stanley and saying, well, this could really apply to a larger audience. So that's when I decided to start the company and say, some of the themes that we were looking at web servers, introduction of web servers, mobile devices, what other individuals, companies were interested in that information. So we did a series of information forums for companies. And then we started getting into software development. And we were actually one of the first companies to build Morgan Stanley's intranet. So we cut our teeth on building an enterprise-grade intranet for Morgan Stanley, which they ended up using globally. So we started in Japan, they used it around the world. And then that led me into building rich web applications. Things we take for granted today, the drag and drop sort of thing. We take it for granted today because the bandwidth is there, all the backend technology.
Yeah.
Back in year 2000, it wasn't there. So it was really hard to make an application that heavy in terms of the graphics. It was really slow. And so we were very careful with how much we would, require the browser to actually, paint and generate. But over time, as bandwidth increased with modems, that made it easier for us to put more on the browser. Today, we see this as like React and these types of frameworks where you can create these graphical user interfaces that are very much like what you see on desktops and compete with Windows, those sorts of things. But we were doing that back in the early 2000s, so we were very pleased to be an innovator of that space. And they'll help usher in rich web interfaces.
That's very impressive. And you've been in this space for a long time. You've done research in blockchain, AI, cybersecurity. Looking forward to 5-10 years, especially with the rise of AI, what do you see as emerging technologies, especially for students and new grads and people out there for starting out their career? What kind of predictions do you have for the near future?
Sure. My research institute, Internet Think Tank, and we've kind of gone full circle from doing software development to consulting, and now we are a full-fledged research institute. And a lot of our research labs focuses on those emerging technologies, where we see things going, and we really want to be part of that and help contribute to that innovation. Of course, AI is always at the top of the list these days, and for a very good reason. It's not just a catch term here, but what we're really looking at is kind of the evolution and the birth of agentic AI, where it's more than just a large language model. It's really modeling the different modules of the brain. So yes, you have a language component that can understand human speech, but then what does it do with that information? So you can have another agent that executes on that, says, okay, we want to do data manipulation. So it understands what the person wants in terms of data. It can go out to data sources, manipulate that data, do a lot of data enrichment, and bring back a solution. We have another component of agentic AI that's graphical, right? It creates pictures, and so it can understand what a person wants and even create an image. So you can now think of agentic AI as all these modules that is highly focused on very specific skills. And if you have enough of these modules, then you kind of are emulating a human ability to not only take commands, but to execute on those commands and give you some answers. What we see as the next version or the future of AI is this whole emotional element. The big limitation that people often experience, and they always complain about it to me, is like, well, why can't AI, be on a call center and understand me, well enough to understand my problem and fix it? And the reason often is because the AI doesn't have this emotional element. They don't understand, consumers' urgency. They don't understand their emphasis, if they want to emphasize on one thing versus another. And we're beginning to see the difference between what makes us human and what makes AI artificial. And it's really the emotional aspect of human cognition that helps us truly understand what another person is trying to say. Most of what we communicate is not through our words. It's through our tone of voice. It could be through our body language. It could be through touch as well. So we have to fully understand the exchange of signals, communication signals that humans go through, and how emotions plays a role in how those signals are passed in order to teach AI how to do that well. So that's where we focus a lot of our research on, is really understanding how to create agentic AI systems that have emotional content and is able to truly understand a human's intentions, not just what they're saying, but really what they intend to do and be able to react on that. I think another major innovation space is in quantum computing.
Yeah.
And that's coming faster than probably most people realize. They may not be very familiar with what quantum is or how it works, because it's very bizarre. It does deal with subatomic particles, and those particles do not behave in the way classical physics works. And so we look at things like the spooky action at distance of quantum particles that are entangled. If you entangle them, you change one, the other will change. You can actually measure its state based on the one you measure, no matter how far apart you separate those particles. And then we're looking at that in terms of how can we use that for quantum key distribution for security? How do we enhance our security keys using quantum? How do we teleport information faster than the speed of light? We're literally transporting information instantaneously. So quantum, once we see a fully mature quantum world, it's not going to be anything like that we imagine, right? I mean, it's going to completely change how we function in every single word. Cryptography, an internet that's going to be instantaneous. Those are things, the possibilities when that paradigm happens will completely change how we do everything. So I would say for the students, then you're coming into industry at a very exciting moment, where if you really start looking at quantum carefully over the next 20 years, quantum will be much more mature. And certainly quantum computers will be here, which will be extremely powerful computers. That would be normal for your generation, is to say, yeah, quantum computers is standard.
That's
what kind of solutions can I make?
Very, very exciting stuff. Moving on to a rather interesting subject. In June 23, you testified before Congress about the blockchain technology applications beyond finance. What was that experience like, as well as what was the key message you want the lawmakers to understand about this technology, blockchain?
Yeah, it was a very unique experience. I was called before the U.S. Congress, the Energy and Commerce Committee, that wanted to understand more about blockchain, because there had been some controversial issues with some blockchain providers, and of course the lawmakers wanted to know, should we trust blockchain? What is it? Are regulations required? And so they brought two academics, myself and another professor, Dr. Reyes, and there also was the head of Polygon and an IT expert who had testified before Congress. What we really were there to do was to educate. I think the lawmakers realized that blockchain was a very esoteric technology. They know about Bitcoin, they know about Ethereum, and they would see it mostly as a cryptocurrency, as most people do. But they knew that there was more to the technology that they weren't understanding. And in order to truly understand America's role in that technology and our leadership in that technology and how we could and should be using it, they really wanted people from both the industry and the academic side to explain that to them. Now, a little backdrop to the testifying before Congress. The reason I was called there was because actually a couple of years prior, I was asked to present to Congress online for a COVID application I created based on blockchain. And it did get some press, and some of the folks from congressional leaders learned about it, and they invited myself and a colleague of mine from Villanova University, Dr. Shen Zhao, to present what this technology is. Essentially, it was a COVID contact tracing application. So basically, if you have a cell phone, and if I have a cell phone, and we both have an application that connects to this blockchain, my cell phone device could detect when it's 6 feet away from your cell phone device using Bluetooth low energy. So we used the Bluetooth capabilities of the cell phone to kind of detect whether or not we're within 6 feet of each other. If we are, that's a potential for transfer of the virus.
I think Apple did implement a feature. Similar.
Apple cooperated with Google to actually implement a feature to do this ability to see. But they were using kind of keys, encryption keys on the phones, and there are some limitations. You can only do this within a specific city. And so what we did was say, okay, yeah, we'll leverage the actual mobile devices, but we're going to create a global app. So that was the one big difference of what we did with blockchain, is that because blockchain is global in nature, we could take the fact that two people are at 6 feet from each other, and as soon as we know that, we get it off of the phone. We don't want that information actually held on the phone. We push it to the blockchain, and we let the blockchain sort it out. And the blockchain, which is global in nature, now can detect if I go to another country, but if I infected COVID from a person, I would still get notified 2 weeks later if that person said, oh, I now have COVID. They update their app and says, I have the virus.
Wherever you are.
It will look at everyone, that person came in contact with and notify them, regardless of where they are in the world, that you could be infected. And that was a more practical solution for COVID because COVID didn't care about borders, didn't care what country you were in, didn't care what city or state you were in. And I told the congressional leaders, and it was a point that I made, a bit of some criticism to them, that if you really want to create a technology that can contain a global pandemic, you need a global application. An application that only focuses on a state-by-state basis doesn't really help. People do move around, and certainly move around from country to country as well. So our solution was really a way to look at how do we address this kind of global pandemic with a global solution. And that's one of the larger thrusts that I provided to them at the hearing. I also talked to them about how blockchain is being used for national security in space. So we talked a bit about that. They were very interested in that because they saw that as a national security issue for which China could very easily take leadership in. So they wanted to know, well, how do we make sure that the United States keeps leadership in this kind of technology, the use of blockchains in this way? And, of course, the answer is, make sure you're funding and make sure you're promoting and supporting organizations and research in this field.
As a cybersecurity program director here at Comcast, you are responsible for protecting all the retail operations here we have in the US. How do you approach cybersecurity challenges at scale? And what skills should students develop if they want to hold a leadership role, just like you have?
Yeah, so my role here in Comcast, overseeing cybersecurity, and I do this with colleagues here at Comcast, looking over all the retail stores, ensuring that their security footprint is strong. When we try to do this at scale, we want to make sure we're always looking at cybersecurity through 3 lenses. One is people. We want to make sure that the individuals who are in the retail stores or anywhere where we're focused on cybersecurity, that they are doing the right things. They're not subject to cyber attacks, social engineering. So training is a very big part of making sure that the person has the right defenses to deal with cybersecurity attacks. We look at systems. Of course, the systems that are in the environment, hardware, software, we make sure those have strong cyber security checks. We do threat models on those. We also look at their penetration testing, make sure it can withstand any types of attack. And then finally, we look at process. Process is essentially ensuring that the process that we follow, be it the policies, are secure in nature, that you just don't let a person come into the store and make changes, right? There has to be some process that you're following. And oftentimes you see a lot of failure process that allows for cyber attackers to do pretty bad things. And it's simply because the policy was not strong enough, or it was something that people were doing as a nature habit, which was not something that you should be doing. And so that's where we always look at those 3 areas: people, systems, and processes. That's
a cool way to go about it, especially in the cybersecurity and leading people. You've led blockchain hackathons focused on poverty elevation and other such social challenges. How do you encourage students to think about technology's potential impact, social impact?
I think that's a huge area to really try to commit yourself to, because technology is great, but technology is nothing without people. And as long as you keep people at the center of your innovation, societies are going to benefit. So one of the things I tried to do at Villanova University when we did a blockchain hackathon was to get students to think about technology, but for human applications, to really uplift people who are impoverished, whether they're here in the United States or abroad, but to begin thinking of how you use technology in combinations to solve some of the most challenging issues around poverty. It forces a person to first look at poverty, look at the problem, and try to understand how it happens, why it happens, and then try to work your way backwards to see, okay, what are the systemic issues that cause poverty? And then how can technology insert itself to give people opportunities, to get them to network better, to get them to perhaps be more entrepreneurial. When we looked at blockchain, we were very interested in creating more of these community coins and community environments where people can self-help and self-select and create their own teams. They can self-organize. They don't necessarily need to rely on the government to come in and provide them help if they have the ability to actually create sub-economies where they can create that uplift themselves. So combining blockchain with various other types of technologies can give local communities the ability to be more entrepreneurial, to create local economies, where people who have some talents can actually build some uplift for the community as well as for themselves.
And for the older students that are watching, I would highly recommend participating in these type of hackathons that are around your area that will develop multiple skills that are useful in life, not only the technical but social skills as well. And it's a great experience to talk about, and it's a great place to learn a lot of things from a lot of different people. How do you define success in your career, and how does that shifted from when you were first starting out to now? And what advice would you give to students who are trying to create those goals, who are trying to set meaningful career goals?
Yeah, that is a great question. I think when you start out, of course, everyone wants to be successful, and the typical definition of success, which everyone tends to follow, is, well, how do I get a good paying job? Economically, right? They want to know, like, how can I just have good income? And I think that, of course, is part of success because the income allows you to finance your own ideas.
Freedom.
That it gives you some of that economic freedom. But the first level of success really is doing what it is that you really like or what you really love. If you're involved in an industry that you're not particularly happy about, but pays well, then you're essentially burning your life, right? Your time is spent once and that's it. And
you won't get it back.
You won't get it back, right? This is a kind of spend once, and when you look back at how you spent your time, you realize that, okay, I made some money, but I wasn't doing what I wanted to do. And at the end of the day, we really want to innovate. We want to use our creative, ingenuity and apply it to something that we think we can really use to make a big difference in society. So try to gear your career to those areas where you can make a big impact on society, doing things that you love, because you're going to spend many more hours doing things you love than things you don't love. You're not doing it for the money, you're doing it because you're advancing society and you're making an impact and you're feeling great about it. And if you can make that synergy between doing something well and making money, that's success, right? And you can't go wrong there because it just reinforces itself over time. You just get better at it. You're then able to market that. But I think most importantly is do something very well because you love it, and then you figure out how to monetize that.
In your opinion, if you were advising a college kid today about most important skills to develop to become successful for themselves, what would you say those skills are? And how would you advise them to balance the soft skills versus technical skills as well?
Sure. Now, if you want to be successful in really just anything, at the end of the day, you just need critical thinking skills. And great ways to get critical thinking skills is through the maths and the sciences. Again, those things are objective truths, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the hard sciences. Your social sciences as well. They also rely on math. You are quantifying things, you're measuring them, and you're data driven. And you train your mind to be data driven and to look at objective truths and look for opposing views, allow for criticism so that you can get down to the essence of what is real versus what is not. I think as people get into business, there will be many opportunities to, take shortcuts, or to be disillusioned by, instant success. It's important that you really have objective thinking and that you have a very clear view of what is an objective truth so that you can clear out the noise and pursue what is real and what is more impactful. So any entrepreneur, I think that's the first key skill that you really need to have is a very strong set of critical thinking skills that you bring.
I guess that's why they teach us differential equations, even though I'm not going to be a mathematician, but to develop those critical thinking skills. The last question is, what final advice would you give to students who are inspired by a career but may feel uncertain about their own paths? And what would you want them to know about building a meaningful career in technology overall?
I think I'll probably answer this in a slightly different way than most people would. To really build a meaningful career, I believe that, and if you're uncertain about what you're trying to do, remember at the end of the day, no matter what, you're going to be a teacher in some capacity. When you graduate, you're going to teach someone, whether you're going to teach your colleagues at work, a new hire who comes into the organization, or if you're going to teach your children. At some point, you're going to be in the role of teacher. And that means you need to know your material very well. So when you're in class, always study with purpose. Absorb that knowledge, not because you think you're going to use it in the business, but because you may have to teach someone this information. And again, you don't know who you're going to teach, but be ready. That's going to really make you a very strong professional, regardless, because you're always preparing to be able to master the material so that you can share it and teach it and show leadership. And that's what leaders really are, people who can demonstrate to others this is how it's done, and they of course learn in the process of teaching. So I think that's the key goal, is to make sure you're always setting yourself up as being a person of mastery who can teach that information. With that, then it comes down to what is your interest, how you see the world evolving, so that you decide which particular path you want to take. But at the end of the day, you're going to be a teacher in that field regardless.
So can we say learn how to become a teacher, learn how to teach?
That's right.
Hasshi, thank you for all the information you shared, all the advice you shared. I think there's so many things that people can take away from this talk, and thank you for your time. We had Hasshi Sudler as a CEO, as a professor, as a cybersecurity director, and many other titles, many other awards. And thank you, Hasshi, for coming in, and it was great talking to you.
Thank you very much. Our pleasure, and great to be with you.
Thank you.